Hi everybody, Lisa over at iRepair and today on my workbench I will be working on an iPad mini. It is an A1432 and this guy came in having charge port issues. Um, the iPad is not being recognized when the charging cable's plugged in, and so it's not charging the battery. So the customer dropped it off. Now, what I like to do is test it with their cable and then test it with my cable just to make sure, because sometimes they can have a faulty cable and not realize it. So I try to go for simplicity first. So unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And then I tried cleaning out the charge port. Sometimes dust and debris can get in there, and it wouldn't make a good connection on the pin. So did all that, and it didn't recognize it when plugging in. So here is the iPad Mini. And as you can see right here in the upper right hand corner is the battery indicator. And right now it's showing 11%. And normally I do have the charge port plugged into it. And for a known good working one, you would see a lightning symbol displayed right next to the battery um, symbol up in the right hand corner here. This keeps turning off here. And as you can see, I'm not getting that lightning bolt indicator. So what I need to do now is change out the charge port, and that's where I'm at. So let's get started. Board removed from the housing. I already have it locked into my jig here, and on the microscope camera, this is the flex ribbon cable, the charge flex ribbon cable that I need to remove and replace. This yellow tape here, this is Captain tape. It's a heat resistant tape that I like to cover components on the board and the FPC connectors just to save them from any heat that's going to be applied to the board, and it prevents components from coming off or melting. So let's get started. So as you can see, I started applying some flux here, and what I'm going to do now is just add some low melt solder here, because I'm trying to, when these boards are assembled um, at the factory, they use, oh, I got to put on my fume extractor here. They use non-leaded solder, and that has a higher melting point. So we like to apply some quick melt here to help speed up the process of removing the um, the component here. So and all I'm doing is just running it across the pins here, just making sure it gets nice and heated. I'm not applying any force yet. I'm not even interested on trying to pull it yet. So alright, so then I'm going to take my tweezers, or my plastic spudgy, and I'm just going to go along here and lift up as I go along here, and it should start separating itself from the board. Now you don't want to rush it because you don't want to pull any pads from the board. There we go. Just kind of pull it up a little bit and let it take care of itself. Just there we go. Again, I'm not forcing anything. I'm letting it, let gravity do its job here. There we go. Now some people have their ways of removing this. Some use hot air, some use soldering iron. So you use what you're comfortable with. Now I go back and forth. There's times I will use the hot air to remove ribbon cables, and then other times I will use a soldering iron. So it depends on what kind of mood I'm in. There we go. Came off. And as you can see on the camera, can you see on the camera? Here, show it on this camera. Alright, this is the ribbon cable. And we want to make sure we didn't pull any pins, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Right. This is their adhesive that they had on there, so. Alright. All the pins are intact, so now what I need to do is, because I mixed low melt with non-leaded solder, I have to clean these pads off. So when I put on leaded solder, which leaded solder is a low melting point, they don't act well together. So I have to remove the low melt and the original stuff on the board. So first, before I apply the, before I put the cable back on, the new cable. So I'm just going to add some flux and get a small piece of some wick here. Now I'm just going to slowly go across here. I'm not going to really put any pressure on here. Again, and you don't want to stay too long on a pad, because, again, you don't want to lift anything up. So I'm just going to just gently drag it across here. And as you can see, the old stuff is being picked up, because you can see it's starting to turn shiny. Okay, so let's clean the pads off again. Okay, all the pins are nice and cleaned off. So let me put away this low melt here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is apply a thin layer of leaded solder. So I want to add some flux. You always want to add flux because when you're dealing with the heat and everything, and the solder, it distributes it evenly. So just add a little bit here. Okay. Now these two pins here are tabs on the end here. You see it on the camera there and there. I don't need the solder. These are actually, they help you line up the flex cables. There's actually two little windows on the ribbon cable here, and it helps you align the cable onto the board. So I don't need to solder those. If you do, no biggie, but they're not needed on the board at all. So, all right, so I'm just gonna drag this across. It says I really don't need much on here. And make sure you're not there's no bridges either. Okay, let's clean it off and see how that looks. I think they could be just a little bit more puffier. I am not used to wearing. I got a new microphone here, headset here, and I'm not used to wearing something, around the ears and have something kind of laying against the face here. So I'll get used to it eventually. So let's go through and apply some more solder again. Got a couple high spots here. I just want to knock them down a little bit. Okay. So we got the new charge port here. See on the camera here. Alright. Make sure you got the orientation. You want it facing upward. And what we're doing is looking for those two end tabs to line up in these windows here. And then when I know I have a good alignment, then what I'm going to do is tack one end down. You know what? I want to double check my joints here again. Because when you put the cable back on, I'm going to be running the soldering iron along the top of the ribbon cable, and you have to make sure that there's enough solder on these pins so it can adhere to the pin. So dry it off. Okay. So let's try this again. Okay, I got one end tacked in, so now I'm gonna So now I'm just going through and just tacking each pin. Okay. So let's clean it off and see how it looks before I put it back in the housing and test it. Because you really won't know if this works until you go and put everything back in the housing and connect everything. So right, camera. All the pads are nice and tacked. That guy, I can see a little movement there, so All right, throw some flux on here and clean up all that bridging. Just going to drag it across. There. Okay. Okay. All looks good, all intact. Oop. On the camera there. There we go. There. All right. One last cleaning before I go ahead and put it back in the board and test it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is pause the video for a few minutes. I'm going to get this back into the housing. Then I'm going to go ahead and start the video up again. It's going to take me a few minutes and try to save some time here, so I don't want to bore you with it. So I will be right back. Okay, now that I've got the board back into the housing, I do have it powered on. I haven't tested anything yet, so you're going to see it at the same time I see it. As you can see on the, trying to get this in focus here for you. Come on, buddy. There we go. As you can see that the battery charge is at 8%. Now, when I go to plug in the charging cable, if this was a successful repair, what we should see to the right of this battery symbol is that lightning bolt indicator. And if it shows up, that means that the part was replaced successfully. It did resolve the customer's issue, and we will be good to go. So let's go ahead and try it now. So because I don't have everything screwed in, I have to hold the port and then plug in the cable. Oh. All right, let's get it on camera again. Bring the screen back up. And there we go. As you can see, now we're at 9%. But then also here's that light. Here's that lightning bolt symbol. So yeah, so this was a successful repair. So now all I need to do is just go through and reassemble everything. Put a fresh coat of double-sided tape on the screen and everything, and this unit is ready to go. So I hope you learned something from this, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks.